Thank you. I appreciate everyone coming to our meeting this morning, and if you would like to speak to the board, please fill out the cards that Rachel has up here. Do we have any cards? We don't? Oh. Well, okay. What? Yeah, she's coming. Thank you very much. Robin Shaw, please. Robin, you are speaking for a group. Please come to the podium and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Robin Shaw. I live at 10970 Oakdale Terrace in Seminole. I've been here before to ask to save Route 58 because I've heard rumor that it's slated to be on the cutting board again. I was here last time, I think in 2015. I don't know if you remember me. I'm the one with Tourette's, and I apologize.
Could you please speak into the microphone, please?
Okay. Thank you. Sorry. But I've gathered some signatures because we were concerned again this year now with the rumors going through that we are slated to be on the chopping block, even though I've heard rumors also that we're okay for 3 years fiscally to keep running. I'm just here to support the 101 individuals I just got from my route, my run. I've got their names and some addresses. Some didn't have enough time to write their full address, but they did put their name down. They are concerned. My bus family has been with me on and off for, 9 years now. And we get to work and home again, and the hospitals and the library and the schools. And I do love a lot of these folks. A lot of them I've just met newly this round that I went to try and get these signatures to implore you not to cancel Route 58. We live and work here already, and I know we want tourist money for the free ride in St. Pete with the electronic buses that we bought and free advertising to get it out there in the community. We do realize it's important to have places you can plug in too. So I understand you've got routes running for free every 15 minutes, 7 days a week, but to cut my route and hurt my community family would be, I would be so indignant that I would want to almost, I can't say how angry I would be at all of you elected officials. I was mad at one woman, and I won't say her name, from Dunedin, likening your jobs to trash collection. We're not trash in your communities that you pick up. We work at these jobs. These are high-paying jobs. Raytheon, I was there. She said that it was likened to trash collection. Yes, we're trash on the side of the road to pick up. And there was titters around the board that day. I was here, and it hurt, because this is my family. Yes, some of us aren't really smart. I have Tourette's, but I do have a good job at Raytheon. I've had it for 30 years. I really don't want to lose my job. I love all of you. You are my family, my community. My grandchildren will marry your children someday. Grandchildren. I love every one of you, I do. I understand fiscally you need your jobs. We do too. I have a lot of extra time, but if I can return these names in, some of them wrote, I asked them to write, why is it important to them? Because we're individuals, but wholly we're kind of indignant that we're having to fight again. This is an important corridor in our community, the Bryan Dairy corridor, to 118. That was extended for our community to have more businesses, better paying jobs, better housings in some places. Bless you. Love you, honey. But, sorry, that was my husband.
Ms. Shaw?
It's just kudos. I'm so sorry. But here, I don't know how to turn these in and get you to, to see the
Cassandra Borgia is right behind you. Will take
Sorry.
your petition from you. And may I just say on behalf of the board that we apologize for the insensitivity of the remarks that were made. Sometimes we can't always control what people say.
I know I can't do it myself. Even with meds, it doesn't work 100%.
Trust me, I know. But we are working very, very diligently and very hard to put in place some solutions so that we don't have to make these
I
cuts.
know, and I thank
It's
you.
not easy, and you'll, if you stay today, or you don't, you'll hear that solutions that we're trying to move forward, but, you know, the resources are many, and, I mean, the resources are finite, and the needs are voluminous.
I know.
So we're doing the very best that we can,
I
and we will continue to do so. And conversations like yours are important for us to hear. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you, love. Thank you all.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anyone else that wants to speak from the public today? Thank you. Okay, well, now we have our first item, which is to hear the national recognition that PSTA is receiving about our marketing efforts from PSTA's Digital Marketing Manager, Alyssa Kostick. Alyssa, welcome.
Good morning, Board.
Good morning.
As you can see, I am not Cindy, the Director of Marketing. She is in New Orleans right now with half the team accepting 3 national marketing awards on our behalf, with Mandy Oglesby and Bill Radke, the other half of our marketing team. But here with me, I would like to introduce the other half of our marketing team. They could stand up. Edith Randall, our marketing assistant, Mia Kabigting, and Lizelle Murray, our graphic coordinators.
Thank you for being with us this morning.
So they are in New Orleans accepting AdWheel Marketing Awards, which are national marketing awards presented every year at the annual marketing conference for APTA. Here we have pictured Whitney Fox, our PR manager, Bill Radke, Cindy, Mandy, Juan Luvian, and Nicole Dufa, and Bob Lasher is also there, and he is taking the picture. The first award that we received was for our 2018 Spring Break Partnership for Best Marketing and Communications to Increase Ridership or Sales. As you see in front of you, we have a palm card for our partnership that will be kicking off this year, this week. We will be implementing a lot of the same things that we did last year that made this partnership so successful. We work together in this partnership with the City of Clearwater, the Chambers, and the Jolly Trolley to make this happen. The second award was for Best Marketing and Communications Educational Effort for our Appy Hour event that was at Greenbench. And it was probably the first event in PSTA history that was ever at a brewery. I know that we had some of our board members at that event. This was some of the signage that you would have seen there, and we even had Snapchat filters. How many know what a Snapchat filter is?
Commissioner Bennett was at the event. I'm sure
Yes.
you were using your Snapchat filter. Were you?
One of the reasons that we chose Greenbench for the event was their owner is very pro-transit, and it's going to run along our BRT line. We had reps from the app that actually flew down from Canada to represent at the event. The event created a lot of buzz, and we do track it monthly, and we've had over 22,000 downloads in a year. And lastly, the TRAC Star Award, which is our most recent for Best Marketing and Communications to highlight transit needs or funding. And this award was for a shoestring campaign, which means that there is little to no budget involved that goes to this campaign. And With this award, we have to show that there is an ongoing, lasting relationship or ongoing value to the community. And with this award, we've shown that it has already given back in many areas to Pinellas County. Any questions?
Congratulations.
Excellent job.
Questions, board members?
Yay, awesome.
And Mark O'Hara for the committee updates, please. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairwoman Long, Mr. Miller, and esteemed board members. The TRAC committee met on February 19th, and there are a few items I would like to highlight for you. First, we heard public comment from former TRAC Chairman Gloria Lepak-Corrigan regarding possible cuts to paratransit services. Ms. Lepak-Corrigan expressed concern that the decrease in availability of paratransit services could be detrimental to those Pinellas County citizens that are reliant on this as their only mode of transportation. TRAC members then voted to approve funds for the purchase of additional electric buses to join the PSTA fleet. Henry Lukasik also demonstrated the software that tracks the real-time performance of the electric buses running the St. Pete Looper via the internet. The committee also voted to approve the TRAC Star Award nominations to receive the awards. One for the design bus shelter and the ADA-compliant sidewalks and ramps made by Shoveler Corporation at the Park Street and 54th Avenue North entrance. This is the new outdoor shopping center. And the other award went to the Pinellas County Public Works for constructing a new crosswalk for pedestrians across McMullen Booth Road to enter Meese Countryside Hospital. Finally, members discussed and finalized our TRAC initiatives for 2019. The committee agreed to continue the Star Award as well as to help promote projects and services as ambassadors in concert with the with PSTA staff. This will include attending town halls, such as the one upcoming on March 1st at Clearwater Beach Transit Center, assisting PSTA staff at outreach events and other opportunities to communicate with fellow riders and the general public. I'd also like to thank Board Member John Schulman for attending our meeting. The next TRAC meeting will be held on March 19th at 4 o'clock, and as always, board members are welcome to attend. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, for that very comprehensive report. Any questions for Mark? Anyone? No? Okay. Next, we will hear about the recent local coordinating board meeting from its chair, Commissioner Patty Johnson. Patty, if it's okay with you, in addition to your giving your report, I'd like you and Commissioner Bennett to tell the board about your trip to Tallahassee.
Okay, that's part of it. You got it?
Good job. Okay. Thank you.
The local coordinating board met on February the 19th. We heard an interesting presentation about the DOT's Tampa Bay Next Workforce Development Project. Long title. However, it is helping hard-to-employ individuals get well-paying jobs working on the Gateway, Express, and other FDOT projects. When they get through with these persons that are chronically unemployed, they will start at over $14 an hour, and they have the opportunity to go way up from there. But that's bottom base entry level, 14 something an hour. And highway construction is going to go on for as long as we need roads. So it's a very good program. The most amazing part of the meeting was that for the first time ever, we were joined by Steve Holmes, Executive Director of the Florida Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged. Transportation disadvantaged is not something that is coming from what we think of, that's my taxes. It actually is your taxes, but it is a trust fund. And Stephen Holmes has control of who gets what, okay? So he's really important to us. And we push as hard as we can to get people to encourage Mr. Holmes to assist us in our endeavors. And because we have worked so hard and done such a super job, he actually came to see us and asked for more innovative programs. All at the same time, we're telling him, that's great, but our 3-year innovative programs that have a waiting list for each one of them is coming due to be renewed. So those are things that we have to work on. He told us about how the state legislature created a pilot project that has just started right here in Pinellas County. It's called Advantage Ride, and it offers free regional door-to-door trips for individuals with developmental disabilities. Steve also noted his transportation disadvantaged budget for the coming year has a shortfall. So he warned LCB, our coordinating board, to prioritize PSTA's transportation disadvantaged services in case the projected statewide TD funding shortfall is not corrected by our state elected officials. So here's another part of the pie, the entire pie for PSTA that we're trying to work on. Speaking of state elected officials, myself and Brad, Commissioner Richard Bennett, and PSTA's Whitney Fox were recently in Tallahassee and had several great meetings where we were highlighted the need for strong transportation disadvantage funding and assisted with ensuring Medicaid pays for transportation to and from medical appointments rather than PSTA paying. In other words, the Medicaid recipients are entitled under the state programs to charge Medicaid for their trips, and their case manager is supposed to be assisting them. It's not happening. It's just too easy to call us because we don't turn anybody down. Commissioner Bennett, do you have anything to add? Did you enjoy our trip?
Sure. Is my microphone on? Sure, it
You're
was a
on.
great trip. Just as a little sideline, I'd like to comment about an area that sometimes we consider to be derogatory or we think they make too much money, but I wanted to make a positive comment about our lobbyists. They met us in Tallahassee. They took us over to the Capitol building. We met with all the Pinellas County representatives and senators, and we met on time. Brad and I and Pat discussed what the senators have done for us in the past, asked them to keep working for us. We brought up new ideas, new things, and those lobbyists participated in our conversations and knew our business very well, so they did a great job. We did talk to the senators about, and the representatives about the bed tax, that it's great to do a lot of advertisement, get a lot of tourists to the Tampa airport or St. Petersburg airport, but to get them over on the beach to the hotels, you need a bus. And so we asked for help with that. So I think maybe we might have gained a little ground in that area. We also talked to them about our electric buses, about the Central Avenue corridor, the new 41-mile route. So it was a very good meeting, and we were able to give those people that have the cash a lot of good reasons to give us part of it. So thank you very much.
Could I add one more thing? In our county and in the United States, we have people that have to live in assisted living. And when they don't have money, they get a whopping $54 a month. That's to spend on hairbrush, toothpaste, clothing, eating, eating out. And one of the people that I work with was discharged from the hospital at noon. I didn't get a call until 3 o'clock that she needed transportation home. it would cost her $35.50, which is most of the whole month's money to get home from the hospital. And the hospital had already discharged her, so she couldn't spend the night. The assisted living has a van, but it was broken. So in order to get her home without spending her entire month, we had to find a way. Actually, the hospital let her stay the night because we explained you can't do it. But the sad thing is, and Janet, discharge planner, I said, well, did you call DART? I don't know what DART is. So our hospitals, and David, I know you worked hard on this, our hospitals don't know that we have a transportation program for these people. And I think that that's another area we're going to have to work on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Those kind of challenges present great opportunities for our marketing folks, so I hope you were listening, and we'll get right on that with our hospitals in the county. Thank you very much. Okay, now we are at our Forward Pinellas report, and Chairman Eggers, if you would be so kind as to give that report today. You did such a great job yesterday.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank Robin Shaw for coming this morning and sharing her story. We, at the encouragement of a PSTA employee or two, have now started to get a few others coming to the Board of County Commissioners meeting. We had a couple yesterday, folks that were explaining their plight and their dependence on the buses, really up more in the North County, but nonetheless still another person who really been trying to get to work in one case, in the other case trying to maintain independence for a senior. So these are the stories that we're hearing. People wanting to get to work, seniors wanting to be independent, among others. So it really is important to hear from you. So I really appreciate your coming here today. We did have a revenue conference, just so you know, a few weeks back between the Board of County Commissioners, PSTA, our MPO, to talk about how to raise more funds locally, trying to figure out how we're going to do it with the funds that we have, and then exploring potentially other revenue sources. And so that discussion is ongoing. PSTA has a very sparse budget right now, and we know we have to do more. We're looking for all kinds of places for that money. But just so you know, don't give up the ship. We're working on it and see what we can do in the interim. Just for the report from the Forward Pinellas Board meeting, we met on the 13th. The Florida Department of Transportation gave an update on the alternate US 19 corridor study. The focus of the study is to improve safety for all users and improve mobility between Park Street and St. Petersburg and all the way up to Pasco County line. Much of the corridor has some well-used public transportation running in it as well. The FDOT has done a separate study, so we've got two different studies going on right now, a corridor study and a cultural corridor study. So the two are being merged together so we can figure out some funding for some projects along that route. Also, the board also approved policy decisions which have been sent to the legislative, and they're typical of ones that we're hearing from our groups here locally. A more flexible transportation funding, stopping distracted driving, and encouraging transportation mobility. So it's the same message that all of our groups are giving our state representatives, and we're kind of coming together as a single voice. The other thing that the FDOT and Forward Pinellas have started is a new regional household survey. And the survey is collecting valuable information on how people get around our region. Why you go from where you are in the morning to work or whatever and then back. And so you can get online and go to tampabaysurveys.com, tampabaysurveys.com, and give your input. It's really, really important that we understand some of our traveling behaviors if we're going to come up with the right solution. So a very important survey. And we continue to work following up on our joint funding workshop that I spoke about a minute ago. They continue to have that conversation on many of our boards. So that's about all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for speaking to the citizens that came to visit us yesterday. I know we're all going to work really, really hard to solve these issues. It's not easy, and our next funding opportunity with all of our partners, I understand, is trying to be scheduled for the month of April. And that seems like so far away, but really it's not. Time passes so quickly. So anyway, I will give you the T-BARTA report, which is our other transit group that meets in the region. And we met last Friday. It was a very interesting meeting, not one that we as elected officials usually get involved in. So I'll share with you some of that at the end of my report. The governing board approved 2 different contracts for 3 years with 2-year options to WSP USA and Valerian Group, not to exceed $3 million, and authorize the executive director to exercise the 2 one-year options. I share that with you because it's exciting to be able to award contracts when we actually have money to spend, and for so long, T-BARTA has been somewhat in the ditch with regard to our finances, and thanks to our great CFO, Debbie Leos, and Brad, we have managed to pull them seriously out of the ditch and now have a balanced budget with money in the bank. And I am looking forward to Brad and Debbie doing the same thing for PSTA in terms of making sure that we have solutions to continue providing our service and expanding it. We also are in the process right now, as we speak, of having our very limp website redesigned to make it very consumer-friendly and user-friendly so that we can use it as an opportunity to educate our citizens on what the plans are and what we're moving forward to do on behalf of the region. The last thing that we did, which was really troubling to quite a few of our elected officials on the board, was we heard a presentation and recommendations that were made from staff on a firm in Washington to advocate for us at the DC level with the Federal Transportation Agency and our colleagues in the Congress. It was a bit distressing to see that 3 members of our board were very anxious to ensure that a firm out of Tallahassee actually be the one that we retain to advocate for us in DC. And through some very interesting questioning from the board, it came to our attention that this firm that was being recommended by these 3 folks had no transit experience, none. And that recommendation was being made over 2 other firms that were very transit-oriented. A little difficult to understand, and because we needed 7 votes for one way or the other, and we had 6 votes who wanted to go with the agency that we have, actually, Van Scoyoc, because they're so knowledgeable about the transportation process in Washington. And there were only 3 votes on the other side. We are now punting that decision until April, just FYI. So for those of you that are very interested in improving our regional transportation, it could be helpful maybe if you would like to reach out and encourage the board chair to recommend an agency that actually knows what they're doing. Just FYI. It really made me appreciate the procurement processes that we do at the county and that we do here at PSTA, because board members who aren't always the most knowledgeable about the intricacies of working through a huge bureaucratic process like Washington, D.C., don't have to get involved in those kind of discussions at the board level. which is pretty nice. So that's my report on T-Barter. Stay tuned, lots of more interesting things to come. And let's see, now with that little report, I have, okay, so now I would like to move us to the consent agenda, and if you would all please, I'd like to have a motion on our consent agenda.
Move to approve it.
Thank you very much. Motion by Commissioner Barkley, second by Commissioner Gerard. Please open the voting card. Terrific. That looks like a unanimous vote. That's great. All right, and now we are on to our action items. The first one is the evaluation for our CEO, Brad Miller. PSTA rules require that as chair, I also serve annually as chair of the Personnel Committee to organize the annual evaluation and compensation adjustment for our CEO. I'd like to thank all of the board members here that participated in that meeting and all of you who also took the time to complete our evaluation of Brad. The scorecard that PSTA uses now was extremely helpful as we had our discussion. The Personnel Committee met on February 15th, and after reviewing the compensation comparables and other information that is in your board packet, the committee unanimously recommends adjusting the CEO's salary by 3%. This would set Brad's salary at $197,950 for the next year. This is the only recommendation adjustment to Brad's compensation, and the 3% adjustment is under PSTA's budgeted adjustment that was planned for from our CFO. And it also, so it saves us a little bit of money, and as you can see by the comparisons that you have in your iLegislate, it maintains the compensation within the lower part of the national range for comparable positions and below his new counterpart over at Hart. The Personnel Committee had a good discussion with Brad about the obvious need for he and his team to commit additional focus to developing financial solutions for our sustainability and to work with the PSTA Board, County Commission, and other partners to achieve great success in this area. And I'm so pleased to share that for the first time, Brad, our county administrator, and Whit Blanton, who's sitting here from Forward Pinellas, are now engaged in ongoing meetings to work in consort with one another to help identify and move forward solutions for our transit agency that really, I know we're all smart people, and I think that we can surely find a solution to this problem. And I'm looking forward to those discussions. So with that said, I would like to open it up for board discussion. Any questions, thoughts, concerns, comments that you feel compelled to make at this moment with regard to Brad? Commissioner Eggers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First
You're
of all,
welcome.
I did do the review, and I made some comments as well. And I think from my perspective over the last 4 years, I think Brad has continued to show dramatic, in my mind, dramatic step-ups, and I really attribute most of it to the partnerships that he's created with the folks around the area. Albeit the first couple of years a little bumpy at times, it certainly has gotten smoother, and I think more comprehensive. The discussions are very productive, and I think we're lending a lot of services here to others, whether it's T-Barta, whether it was working closely with Hart on some shared services. I just think there's been a lot of things that Brad stepped up on, and I really commend him for that. My take this morning would be a positive, very positive review, and would look to see that kind of agreement, because I think there seems to be some discrepancy on the percentage, and I don't want a no vote on a percentage to be a reflection on the review that Brad's getting. So from my perspective, his review was very good. I compared it to others. It's probably not as good as others, but that's because it's all relative to our own value system. I don't give too many fives, and so I saw a lot of fives flowing around. So because of that, my numbers aren't going to be as high, but I really wanted to give him a very positive review, but would not be supportive of 3%. I think at this time, PSTA needs to, the leadership needs to send a signal to all employees that we are really trying to tighten the belt, to all other partners who we're trying to share monies with and develop money sources with, that 2% for our leader at this time is a good thing. And so that's what I would support, but those are just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers, for your very thoughtful comments. Commissioner Barkley?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Is my microphone on? Do I need to put the?
It's on.
It's on, okay. I would concur that Brad has done great things to bring PSTA up substantially in terms not only of our position within our marketing group, but also with regard to our national analysis of how we stack up compared to other transit agencies across the country. I think he has done an outstanding job, and I would like to, at this point, make a recommendation to approve the 3% raise.
Thank you. Oh, okay, hold on. Thank you for your, thank you very much, both of you, but can we just hold on because we have a few other comments here. Thank you very much. Commissioner Rice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just want to say that anybody who's had the opportunity to travel to Tallahassee or Washington, D.C. with our PSTA team led by Brad Miller can really just observe how PSTA really stands out for our innovation amongst other transit agencies. And I would concur with Commissioner Eggers' comments on just how far we've come in the last few years, how far Brad has come. And I was very comfortable with recommending a salary adjustment of a 3% increase. It was also my observation that some of the PSTA commissioners who have worked with Brad the longest tended to give the highest scores and some of the more positive comments. And I would also comment that the Performance Review Committee, made up of Chairwoman Long, Commissioner Gerard, and myself, the three of us that really dug into this at our committee meeting, all recommended a 3% increase as well. So I would, I know we still want to discuss this more, but I would second Commissioner Barkley's motion on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rice. Are there any other comments that anyone feels compelled to make on his evaluation that you haven't already made in your written one? No? All right, well, seeing none, I just would like to follow up, if you don't mind, because we're moving through the agenda very nicely. I'd like to ask our CFO, Debbie Leos, to come forward and to share with us the budgetary place that we're in with regard to the CEO's salary and the recommendation. Could you speak to that, Debbie, please, so
Thank you.
everybody's very
Thank you,
comfortable?
Chairwoman.
Thank you.
Yes, we currently have in the budget 3.5% for the CEO. So this is well within that budget for this year.
Thank you very much. Yes, Commissioner Gerard. Pressure.
How does that compare to the rest of the staff at PSTA? What have you budgeted for them?
The rest of the staff is also, we had budgeted 3.5%. The average did come in at about 3%.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you. I was debating whether I wanted to comment on this. Ultimately, a difference between a 3% or 2%, we're talking $1,900. It's not a tremendous amount of money given the salary. And I think Brad's done a wonderful job, and I've really appreciated the conversation we've had and how he's helped bring me along. But I also think, to somewhat echo Commissioner Egger's point, facing a budget shortfall, it's important to send a message that, you know, we're all looking to find ways to save some money, and therefore, I would be supportive of a 2% increase and won't be in favor of a 3%.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? All right. I just would like to, not that I think that I will sway your minds, the folks that spoke about the 2%. I think in view of the work that has been done this last year and how deep into the weeds PSTA had to go in order to help our partner agency, that weighs very heavily on me in terms of how passionate Brad and his team are about providing good transportation for our citizens. I am very sensitive as well to the parity and equity issue that exists nationally with CEOs who are in charge of big bus systems. And the other thing that I've been with Brad to Washington, and it's an interesting experience to walk those halls with him at the national conferences. Everyone is tugging on Brad's sleeve about the innovation and the forward thinking that is going on at PSTA. On top of that, they are pulling at him to meet with him to figure out how he has done what he's done for PSTA and what can they learn from him. He serves on many national boards and is a highly respected and visible leader in the transit industry. So to me, that is significant, and I don't want to send a message to the rest of the transit world that we don't appreciate our leader and how difficult it is. The financial solutions that Debbie has managed to put together for PSTA have been nothing more than miraculous, quite frankly. And there are a lot of those financial issues that he does not have control over. I also think it's important to point out that even with the 3% increase, Brad is going to be making less than the new CEO at Heart, who has absolutely no transit experience. So please keep that in mind as you're making your recommendation today and taking your vote. Commissioner Driscoll?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Since I have just joined this board, I didn't participate in the evaluation process just without having the experience on this board to make to create a good response. But I do want to tell you that one of the main reasons that I asked to be appointed to this board was because of the leadership that Brad has provided for this organization. The staff that he's put together, the team that he has here, and the real progress that has been made is a real asset to our county. And are we where we need to be? No. The finances are serious, and they're not they're not where they should be at this point. But I believe we're moving in the right direction, and I think that's because of this board and because of Brad's leadership. And for that reason, I will be in favor of a 3% increase so that we can continue to look to him to provide that leadership. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Cox.
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also totally agree with the way that you prepared and said that about Brad, his value to this organization, and also using the comparison of other transit, authorities, how Brad weighs in for us. And also, I want to state that I admire Brad riding home in the rain last night.
I saw that too.
I think it was wonderful that, and then he said he was feeling happy about it. And good job.
Thank you. All right, so I think we have, no, there's no one, oh, yes, Commissioner Eggers, I apologize, go ahead.
Yeah, well, after you spoke, I just couldn't help myself. And
I
had to-
know, I
had to-
knew it would
I had
elicit
to, I just had to
something.
say one more thing, and that
Okay.
is, and I just wanted to, again, say, again, these comments seem to be all going down the same path, which is very supportive of Brad's work. I remember a few years ago, they weren't as supportive of Brad's work, and I think we've talked local, we've talked at the state level, we've talked at the national level, some of the things he's doing. So I just didn't want some of the comments to kind of say that, well, if you say 3%, then you're supportive, if you don't, you're not. So I remember a few years back in Dunedin when we were heading into that recession that we had some discussion about maybe the executive team should show some leadership and not take a raise while the rest of the staff did. And we didn't go down that route. But I do think that in a time when transit dollars are tough to come by, and I think partnerships, we're trying to get folks on board, you know, I think symbolism is important. I think somebody made the comment, the dollars aren't really the issue. Heck, you could get 0%. It's not as big of a deal in total dollars. It's symbolism that does matter. And I think this organization has been known for its, you know, for its creativity, its leadership in some areas of transit, and I think this is another one. Just because Hart did something that probably wasn't smart, that doesn't make it right, and we should follow them for any particular reason. I'm not saying that what they did was right or wrong, but that doesn't make it the standard. So in any event, I think he's gotten great reviews by this board, qualitatively, if not on the same page quantitatively. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers. I can't wait for your symbolism riding on the bus to the courthouse every day. Commissioner Schulman, I couldn't help myself, David, you know that.
That's fine. Appreciate the challenge.
I also wanted to say, you know, I believe that if it comes down to pure merit, Brad deserves a higher percentage than 3%. And certainly, all the comments here are justified. But I can't remember if it was the planning committee meeting or the finance committee meeting recently, but in a presentation Brad himself gave, he talked about administrative cuts and how that might be an area where we find funds to help sustain the organization's goals. So in light of that, I believe that, you know, the lower percentage falls in line with that methodology that he himself presented. But I also wanted to just echo that if all the funds were available, I think he actually deserves a much higher percentage.
Thank you, Commissioner Schulman. And so I think now we've had a motion and a second, twice actually. So are you good with the motion and the second? Rachel, would you please open up the voting card? All right, we have our votes. It's 10 for the 3% and 4 no. And did you have something you wanted to say, Commissioner Rice?
Yeah, do we also need to make a motion to receive the CEO performance evaluation?
Oh, thank you for sharing that. May I have a motion to?
So moved.
Thank you, and a second. Can you please open the? Okay. What? Terrific. Thank you very much. We all, okay, we're all there. That was a unanimous. Okay.
I was gonna mention.
And now we are on 6B. Right? Yeah. The PSTA nominating committee met back on February 15th and has a number of board committee appointment recommendations for us to approve. Since the chair of the nominating committee, oh, you were not there at the meeting?
I was not there. I had knee surgery.
I am the one that took over the meeting.
Yep.
And Brad, if you could summarize the recommendations, that would be terrific.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So most of the committee work, the nominating committee work was to make recommendations to fill slots on the PSTA board due to new board members. And so the list of recommendations is in your packet. For the executive committee, Commissioner Patty Johnson is recommended to be the 5th member of the executive committee. For the legislative committee, Commissioner Heather Gracie and Commissioner Gina Driscoll to fill the vacancy and alternate spot. All of our committees have an alternate position that is encouraged to attend the meetings and participate just as a full member. The Finance Committee, the committee made no recommendations on that alternate position. We do have a very good track record of having full attendance by our great Finance Committee members, so the alternate is maybe less of an issue there. Planning Committee recommendation is Samantha Fenger for the alternate position. For the Personnel Committee, which meets really only about once a year, Commissioner Gina Driscoll is recommended for that, and the Nominating Committee vacancy was recommended for Commissioner Darden Rice, and immediately she was also voted by the committee itself to serve as its chair. So congratulations.
All right. Any comments or discussion on the nominations? Anyone? All right, may I have a motion, please, to approve this action item? All right, please open the voting card. Thank you. Excellent, and that is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, everyone. And now we are on the electric bus program. Mr. Lukasik, would you please present your presentation? Good morning.
Good morning. If I could draw your attention to the monitors. What you have before you, before I get into the action item, is this is our telematics program for our 2 electric buses. So in real time, we can monitor, track, analyze the performance of how the buses are doing out in service. So this particular bus, 18110, is currently in service on the e-looper, and we're going to keep it up for a few moments. So you'll see things change like speed and performance. It's a highly analytical tool. Like I said, it is in real time, and we're collecting just a wealth of data and knowledge about the performance. Speaking of performance, the 2 electric buses we have been in service since mid-October, and they are performing remarkably well. We have not had any mechanical or operational issues. I hear the riding public enjoys them. They're quiet. You can actually carry on a conversation at a normal tone when you're riding the bus. So I've heard great things, and certainly on the maintenance side, we're seeing great things in terms of their performance. They're doing much better than expected in terms of range and performance. So getting back to the action item, what you have before you, this is the second low-no award that we're bringing before you. If for some of you may recall, back in April, we took a similar item before you, and it was approved. And what they both were, and what this one is the Federal Transit Administration has a competitive grant program called Low-No. What that means is low or no emission vehicle projects. So our planning department, headed by Cassandra Borchers, has been very successful with not 1 but 2 of these grant applications, each of them successful in obtaining $1 million apiece. So there's $2 million total. The plan for this, as was similar with the first Low-No award, is to purchase additional electric buses. So with these 2 awards combined, we will purchase a total of 4 more electric buses similar to the 2 we have in service right now. So that'll bring our fleet count to 6. If you look additionally in your board packet, you'll see a breakout of the project costs and the source of funding. What I do want to mention is if you look towards the bottom under funding sources, you see that the FTA will be contributing $1 million towards this, and PSTA will be contributing $900,000. Basically, as a part of the grant application, PSTA's $900,000 is essentially the cost of what would be 2 diesel buses. So the feds will pay for that incremental cost for the electric buses. So the action item before you is to approve a contract both with BYD Motors for a not-to-exceed of $1.7 million and a total not-to-exceed project cost of $1.9 million. Both the Finance and the TRAC Committee reviewed the action item and unanimously recommended approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, board members? Yeah. Commissioner Eggers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report. I thought the one we had in the Finance Committee was really good and detailed. And so just for clarification, these 2 buses will probably, replace the 2 oldest diesel buses that we have?
Correct.
The ones, that would be the next, those
Yes.
are the next 2 in line. The point you made at the end, which was if we were to buy 2 diesels today, to replace those 2 old diesels, it would cost us at least as much, if not more, than the $900 that we're paying in this.
Correct.
Yeah. So the capital cost for the PSTA is probably less for those 2 buses than it would be for a diesel, for the 2 diesels.
Yes, if I understand what you're asking.
But what I'm trying to get at is that I've always said that we need to be buying diesels because of our capital and our financial situation. And what you said today is that this grant allows us to do that in a
Yes.
fiscally responsible manner.
Yes, yes.
And still maintain the overall board's philosophy of trying to go with less emission buses, lower
Yes.
emission buses. So that's important. You've also said in the past that the operation of this type of bus is cheaper, the annual operating costs.
Right, so with an electric bus, there's fewer moving parts, there's no engine there. So yes, we, at least initially up front, from what we have seen with actual data that our system is helping us track, yes, it is much cheaper.
And the last question I had for you is on the safety side. How are you seeing that safety on the maintenance of the buses? How's that going?
It's going very well. So PSTA has been very fortunate that, over the past 10 years, transitioning from diesel buses to hybrid electric systems, which do have high voltage systems, transitioning from hybrid electric to all electric is a natural step in the evolution. So at least over the last 6 and 7.5 years, our technicians have received ongoing training, especially, most importantly, with high voltage systems. So a lot of the similar practices and safety protocols that you see with linemen out on the electrical grids are the same type of tools and training that we're receiving now. So as we continue, and of course vehicle technology is evolving as well, we continue to invest in our technicians, especially with all electric vehicles and high voltage vehicles. It will be interesting in the next 5 to 10 years where we will be transitioning from looking at diesel technicians and more looking towards electricians.
Well, I wanted to commend you and Cassandra for this, really good stuff, and just if you could kind of keep track nationally on kind of the crash data for these buses and the expenses that it takes to repair a bus like this versus the older buses that we have. So, but appreciate it. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers. Commissioner Schulman.
Thank you. So this also includes equipment for charging, 2 depot chargers.
Correct.
Can you just share some information with regards to the status of the inline chargers?
Sure. So after much analytical looking at the data of how the buses have been performing, the decision was made that we would, instead of installing the inline charger in downtown St. Pete, which represents probably the most southern point of the county, give or take, that it would make much more sense to install it here outside our campus at our, what we refer to as the lay-by. Several reasons for that. Number one, as I mentioned before, the electric buses are doing better than what we originally benchmarked their performance on. So they're getting better range. They're able to stay out there longer per day, both in mileage and time. And so with that, it made much more sense to install the charger here at PSTA because PSTA is more or less a midpoint in the county. So with more electric buses, installing it here would give more opportunities and greater avenues for these buses to really be spread out amongst the county.
One follow-up. It's also my understanding that the inline chargers, they charge faster than the depot chargers?
They are a higher rated electrical capacity. Ours here at the depot are 80 kilowatt, and this one will be a 250. So yes, the idea of en route chargers to provide what we call opportunity charging. So the goal is that for whatever the bus consumes in electricity per trip, per round trip, that it is recaptured at the charge point, so that it doesn't run a deficit, so to speak. So it can theoretically stay out there all day.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Barkley and then Commissioner Albritton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I'd like to congratulate all the folks who were involved in the ability to acquire these very, very valuable grants. Secondly, I think it shows tremendous levels of importance of PSTA and its lead across the country in terms of innovation and technology that we were selected for these grants. Thirdly, I think it's very important that everybody realize that just a few years ago, perhaps over the last 6 or 8 years, we've made tremendous strides towards improving our environment by switching from diesel to diesel electric and then to the more advanced diesel electric, and now we're moving into the electric arena. We're saving money, we're not using fossil fuels, we're creating a lead the fleet image across the country. Everybody knows about PSTA across the country. We're one of the most well-known innovative groups in the country. And I'd like to congratulate everybody at PSTA from our Chief Executive Officer on down for all the work that you have done on this. We're very proud that we've been able to acquire now a steady stream of funding to help improve our environment, save money, and provide an image for other transit agencies around the country to emulate. So just on behalf of the PSTA Finance Committee, who unanimously supported this purchase, I would like to make the motion to approve a contract with BYD Motors for the purchase of 2 35-foot all-electric, zero-emission, low-floor buses.
I'll support that.
Okay, hold on just a second. Commissioner Albritton, you had comments you wanted to make?
Well, I had a question. I really like the concept of the all-electric buses, but I know that in the case of at least cars, it's a very expensive item to replace batteries, and they have a life expectancy. So could you explain to me how much it costs to replace batteries on a bus, and what is the life expectancy? Is that something that's must be figured into the budget, I'm sure?
So fortunately for us, when we selected BYD, their average life expectancy for batteries is 12 years, which they will be warranted for 12 years, which is pretty much an established benchmark for how long transit buses' useful life are. So that's a plus. So for 12 years, basically the life of the bus, the batteries are warranted. BYD is known as a battery manufacturer. That's how they started many years ago. If you had a laptop or a phone, they're primarily a battery manufacturer. So their battery technology far supersedes what most are. Their stated full life expectancy of their batteries, which are on our buses, is 26 years.
Wow.
So what happens many times is that after 12 years, when those buses are retired, those batteries generally come off and they go on to a secondary life, whether as wayside energy storage in a solar power grid or some other backup power generation. So to answer your original question, our batteries are warranted the life of the bus. So that's not a cost that we're going to incur.
That's great to know. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. And Commissioner Rice.
I wanted to jump on that comment. I had the opportunity to tour the Proterra bus manufacturing plant in California. They're not the vendor that we decided to go with, but it was very interesting to see how they construct the batteries and how they construct the bus itself. And it was very interesting to learn that they do recycle all of the batteries. In fact, I saw the room where they had some of the older bus batteries stored ready to be repurposed. And what I also learned is that when a bus typically gets to the point in its life cycle where batteries may need to be fixed or recharged, it's typically also the time that a diesel bus would need pretty serious work on a transmission or drivetrain, so that when you compare those costs, and I don't mean to, no pun intended, I don't mean to drive into your lane here, Harry, but typically when you look at the typical maintenance and replacement costs on diesel buses, the electric buses fare better.
Okay.
That is true.
Thank you.
Commissioner Gerard?
I just had a question about the life of the bus. If the battery could conceivably last so much longer than 12 years, could not the bus last longer since it doesn't have all those moving parts?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we wouldn't necessarily have to replace them at 12 years. Okay, that's nice to know.
Thank you, Commissioner Gerard. Very thoughtful discussion today on these buses. So in the end, it's going to prove to be a very great decision. I do believe we can keep the buses twice as long as we usually do. That's a big deal. Right, Debbie? All right, we have a motion, and I thought we had a second by Commissioner Schulman. Then can you please open the voting card? Thank you. Excellent, that was unanimous. All right, thank you so much. Now, Brad has some very exciting new things to share with us. So, Brad, talk to us about our service adjustments.
Good morning. So I gave these presentations to the Finance and the Planning Committees last week, and I thought it was just important that we present them to the full board, and because despite really no deliberate effort by PSTA staff to advertise the potential that the board approved last month of eliminating some of our services, the word has gotten out through either the funding workshop back in Seminole or some of the, there's been some news articles just about the PSTA board actions. So I thought it was important to present sort of how we developed the adjustments, the specific route recommendations to get public comment, and just the overall process we've been going through. Just a note, maybe before I get started, thank you very much for the good discussion about, first, my performance evaluation, and I think that action by the board speaks very positively. Not only I'm grateful for it, but I think the full staff is grateful for it. As you know, the performance evaluation process now is very much tied together to our overall performance as an organization through the performance counts scorecard that you see on the back of the room. And so my evaluation that you reviewed very positively really is a reflection on the staff, their work, and what they've been doing. And one of the superstars at PSTA, certainly, as I think the Finance Committee knows best, is Henry Lukasik. You know, I'm not sure, since most of your jobs, now that Brian Scott's not on the board, are not in transit on a day-to-day basis, that you don't have your computer set to Google alerts on every transit topic, but of course we do. And I can't tell you the number of not so great articles that I've seen from other transit systems with their deployment of electric vehicles. It's been, you know, it's new technology and it's not going to work the first time very well. And that's certainly been the case, except for, you know, knock on Formica, PSTA. They've only been running for a few months, but so far the electric buses running so well at PSTA is really different than most of the other news I've seen from around the country as far as that's done. And that is a tribute to the maintenance staff led by Henry. It also is due to our staff having so much experience with electric vehicles, with the hybrid electrics that we've been buying over the last several years. So this transition for us has been maybe easier and better. We're really, really proud of it. Henry is actually leading the statewide effort now in a procurement for electric vehicles that the whole state is very interested in buying off of. Just a little side note. So these two presentations that I'll go through very quickly, but they're part of what I'm describing as a due diligence process. As Chair Long mentioned earlier, I'm very, very happy that Whit Blanton and I have started having regular meetings with the new county executive and really building off that January workshop to look at every possible avenue for cost savings, efficiencies in our the way we operate, or new revenue sources far and wide. Look at every possible way in which we can preserve and actually build a much, much better transportation system for Pinellas County. I think the county executive, as the county commissioners know, he's very focused on making sure it's a comprehensive, it's not just a transportation solution, but it's tied to workforce development and economic development in the county. So those are very important things. I know the Ford Pinellas and Whit are very focused looking at the long-range plan that they are required to do and to make sure this makes sense corridor by corridor and how to build a system. So we're really all working together on this. The list that you see on the board there, which is pretty small type, but it is a list of all of the to-do list items on my to-do list and on our staff's to-do list that we're researching and putting together on our end. There's a whole list of items that either are cost reductions, are policy changes in Washington, D.C. or Tallahassee that we're working very hard on. And so this month, there's two little green check marks because those are two items that I'm presenting this month. And then probably next month, we'll see a few more check marks at the Finance Committee and Planning Committee. And then Ford Pinellas has some action items. And so, as you know, the County Commission is working on this as well. The number one goal, and I think I've mentioned this in my one-on-ones with you, is to keep the ball moving forward and to keep the pressure on. It takes a very long time to just schedule meetings, I know, of all these players, and it's very important that we all work together. So my goal, I'm hoping to just, keep the pressure moving on what I can control, is to have actions by June 1st, so that PSTA doesn't have to make fairly dramatic service reductions. Votes by the PSTA board on what those reductions might be, votes by the county commission on transportation revenue, whatever that might be. A vote by Fort Pinellas will be on priorities. That's really more long-term, but it's important because that's what FDOT looks at for allocating state dollars. And then, of course, the legislature will conclude, and so we'll have some answers there. So why did we come to you last month with service adjustment proposals? It actually started more than a year ago, where we at PSTA track our budget very, very carefully every single month, and we started seeing some alarming trends, some maybe half good, half bad trends. Ridership on our paratransit, our DART service, was hitting record levels and going up and up and up, and that's different than the regular bus service. We all want more people to ride the bus, and it is awesome when someone new rides the bus because that does not cost PSTA any more money. It actually makes PSTA money because they pay some amount of fare to get on the bus, and they sit in a seat that we've already paid for. That's why you all are being given flamingo cards at your place, because if you use those, it doesn't cost PSTA any money. The 50 fake dollars that are loaded onto your card, ride all you want, because it doesn't cost PSTA any money. Paratransit is different. As the leaders of CareRide, our contractor, who are sitting here, know very well and have told us, every single time a new person signs up for DART, for paratransit, that costs PSTA tax dollars. The citizens of Pinellas County are paying for that $30-some a ride. So if they go up and back from dialysis every single day, that's $75 a day. It's a very dramatic cost increase. So when DART keeps growing, that's good as far as ridership goes, but it's really putting a major impact on our budget. Of course, health insurance is a major expense within our budget. Overtime, the great economy has really helped some things, but it's also made it very hard to hire drivers. We're being much more competitive, and so we don't have enough drivers. We're constantly hiring. If you know anyone who wants a great job where you really don't have a boss, you just drive around the beautiful Pinellas County all day and have to deal with maybe not too happy customers, we'll hire you. When there's no bus driver, when there's a lack of bus drivers, that increases overtime because the route does run with somebody else making time and a half. We were able to mitigate some of those things. We're doing much, much better now because we have a new union contract that the board approved in the fall, and we ratcheted it up. We're working a lot harder in our training and our hiring to fill the classes, because we train all the employees on how to drive a bus safely. Those classes are going now without any breaks, constantly hiring. I think in the next month or so, we'll actually hit the number of drivers for the first time in probably over a year. So despite these negative sort of like storm clouds on the horizon, PSTA's budget last year finished in a surplus. The staff has done a fantastic job over the years of finding savings in every possible way, and we finished the year with a surplus. That means that the revenues that PSTA collected for fiscal year 18 exceeded expenses. But when we put the budget together for the year we're in now, 19, and the board adopted it, it assumed that revenues would be less than expenses of $1.7 million. Now, I think it's very important that we recognize that now. It is a serious issue that we have to look at. However, the reason that I felt comfortable recommending a budget that was using of $1.7 million in reserve funds was two reasons. One, I knew that these issues, DART, health insurance, the overtime, were not going to be issues that we could solve in a period of weeks or with a T-BARTA-like fix of just finding some money from FDOT, that they were long-term issues that we had to really address, and we're working very hard on all of those issues every single day. The other reason is PSTA's overall financial health is so strong. PSTA has, right now, over $25 million in its reserves that does not count the 2 months operating reserve rainy day fund that we'll never touch, the insurance reserves, those are in addition, and most of the $25 million in our bank account isn't even attached to capital projects. Now I say that just because just during this meeting, actually just during the discussion of my performance evaluation, I got a text from one of my colleagues over in Orlando, just up the road, that the Orlando Lynx board, I guess, was not aware, or I don't know exactly, there's been some news stories that they have a $21 million deficit, and their CEO is resigning over it. So we have a $1.7 million deficit. We have that we're working very hard to address, and everybody at PSTA knows that. That's why we're very excited when we win Shoestring marketing awards, because the marketing department knows we have no money, so they have to do everything on a shoestring. I'm glad there's an award category for that. But the real challenge is this. I mean, we look everywhere for savings, and it's like getting a blood from a stone. When you look at our benchmarking, our peers across the country, we're at the very bottom. We are the most efficient system, one of the most efficient systems out there. Not only are we at the low end of how much it costs us to provide the service that we provide, so compared to the higher cost system at the very right-hand side, Pinellas County gets twice as much service as that city does for the same amount of money.
What city is that?
I'm not really supposed to say because they don't want to feel bad. I don't actually know. That's why it just has a listing there. I can look it up and tell you later which one of my brethren are so expensive. The other thing I like about this chart is if you look, there's about 7 little lines there. Those are the year by year. And you can see that our costs have not been going up. They've actually decreased compared to inflation over the last several years. So then you look at some of the comments that we were made earlier. Well, let's look at ways in which we might be able to save money without affecting the service. Say, reducing administrative costs, maybe in that way. And you can look at that chart too. And we are at the lower end of the administrative expenses to running our system, and those expenses have not gone up over the last several years. Despite that, the staff is very ingenious in looking under every stone to see if we can find savings. We've identified some savings. Like I said, we've increased operator hiring, and that is having a positive effect on mitigating our overtime expenses. We're going to talk a little bit about DART here in just a second, but DART is our paratransit system. We have a sandbox, a very innovative program that we're getting national accolades for, but that is actually going to help us with our budget, because every time we carry a customer to their doctor's appointment on Lyft or a taxi, that saves us money compared to Care Ride, and saves Doug's hair too. We are going to be billing the federal grants more for administrative expenses related to implementing these projects. I hope we can maybe even do more than $50,000 on that. The scorecard system that we're very proud of has surveys, as you know. We survey the customers, the employees, and the do a phone survey of the county taxpayers to compare the value that they see in transportation, we're going to do those every other year rather than every year, and that'll save us $50,000. And then, yes, I put on the chart a $50,000 target toward saving of compensation for next year, Commissioner Schulman. That line item has freaked all the employees of PSTA out appropriately, so it's for the years moving forward. I think I can come up with the $1,900 that, thank you approved by just billing T-Barter for that. So they can notice on that. So here is the list of service adjustments that we presented last month. Again, the board approved this list of routes and services for public comment that we have not started in earnest to take. We have been holding off because we've been having such good progress and good discussions in Seminole and with the county administrator on talking about different revenue sources so that we can avoid making these fairly substantial and impactful, as you heard, reductions. The first thing on the list, which I know a number of you have gotten emails from customers or heard from customers, and I have too, is on reducing DART. DART, and I think they just want to take a moment to explain a little bit more about what DART is and why we provide it. DART is required to be provided by PSTA, by the federal government, by the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act, requires public transit agencies who receive federal funds to provide what's called complimentary paratransit service within 3/4 of a mile on either side of a bus route, of a regular fixed route bus route. The theory is everyone under the ADA law has a right to access transportation. And just because of their disability, that should not preclude them from accessing transportation. Now, every single one of PSTA's vehicles is wheelchair lift, buses is wheelchair lift equipped. So just because you have a wheelchair does not mean you can't ride the regular bus. But there are cognitive disabilities and other disabilities that people have that they cannot ride the regular system. So we provide what in our area we call DART, and we contract that out, and it is very low cost. We have a very low cost per ride compared to our peers, but we have very high volume in Pinellas County. And like I said, it's growing at a record ridership. The other reason it's growing or issue is we provide more DART service than is legally required. As I said, we're only required to operate DART within 3/4 of a mile of a bus route. Well, there are some areas of Pinellas County, not many, but there are some areas like Shore Acres neighborhood in St. Petersburg and the Eastlake neighborhood up in northern Pinellas County that have no bus service. And so they're beyond 3/4 of a mile away from any regular bus route. But we still provide DART in those areas. Care Ride will come pick you up if you live in Shore Acres or in Eastlake. And we pay for that. The customer pays $4.50, but we pay more than $30 a ride for that service. We're looking at lots of different ways to not take away a service that people rely on. They rely on. They have no other way to get around before we ultimately make this final recommendation. One, which Commissioner Patty Johnson and Mr. Bennett and I spoke about in Tallahassee, and I thought we made some good progress there, is about this issue with Medicaid. So Medicaid is a funding source, as you know, that pays for health care for low-income people, and it will pay for transportation to and from doctor's appointments for free for Medicaid recipients for qualified medical appointments. Well, the way in Florida that works is through a brokerage system, a statewide brokerage system where the state has hired companies for regions of the state and paid them a set amount of money for the number of Medicaid recipients. And then for that amount of money, they have to provide all the service. So these companies then hire cab companies mainly to pick people up and take them to the doctors. And they've hired Care Ride and other folks in Pinellas County, and they're just not doing a very good job of it. It's very, very hard for Medicaid recipients in our region to navigate this system, the bureaucracy, and get the ride to pick them up and take them to the doctor. So many, many people, Care Ride estimates maybe 300 people in Pinellas County have given up. And they say, why bother with that horrible thing? And the cab won't even come pick me up for my medical appointment. And instead, they just call DART. They do not try that, and they call PSTA, and they call DART. Commissioner Gerard?
Commissioner Gerard.
Thank you. Is that true in other areas of the state, or is it just Pinellas County or Suncoast region?
It's true in other areas too. I mean, this brokerage system is across the state, and there's been some attention to it in the Tampa Bay area. There's been some news articles talking about people being left and not picked up and things like that. But it's a statewide issue that we've been actually dealing with for a little while. Our state government affairs folks in Tallahassee got a meeting scheduled for me with the Secretary of, it's called ACA, the
Agency for Healthcare Administration.
Agency for Healthcare Administration that oversees Medicaid for the state. She was coming to St. Petersburg, and we were going to meet tomorrow, but she had to cancel her trip. So we're going to still meet with her to see if we can address our issues. There's solutions in place. Of course, Senator Brandes has a bill to allow Uber and Lyft to provide these rides. That would be part of the solution, getting more people easier ways to access their free Medicaid transportation rather than DART. It's not a matter of providing the service. I think I heard there were some folks worried that we were trying to reduce the number of Medicaid. No, we're not trying to do that. We're trying to allocate the costs appropriately. So we're working on that front, I think, in a pretty good way.
Brad, Commissioner Johnson has a...
Speaking of ACA and Medicaid, they are on our Transportation Disadvantaged Board. And every month they come and they acknowledge this problem all over the state. So I come in and there are 4 in the Pinellas County area, service providers, and they just don't. If they don't say it, nobody asks for it. If they keep quiet, if they make it hard, nobody uses it. It's not just here. And that person, that Medicaid representative that's on our board continues to say, I will get back with you. I see Ross in the back of the room. Ross, how many people are we transporting in TD?
We have over 6,000 people a month that get a Transportation Disadvantage Pass, paid for by the Transportation Disadvantage Funds.
And then in TD also, we have the late night shift, and how many are we doing there?
About 70 to 100 every single night are getting a ride.
And then we have another program.
We're like I said, we're working on DART. We have DART customers, over 1,000 a day. People are riding on DART. We've got, we're working on all these different programs.
But 1,000 a day is not chicken feed. And we're doing more than anyone in the state. We're innovative and learning. And that's why Stephen Holmes came from Tallahassee to us. First time ever, ever, ever. So we're working on it. It's just getting the kinks worked out.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Continue. You have more, right, Brad?
Yeah. One option is to just, with DART, would be to maybe implement some of these recommendations to go back to just the 3/4 of a mile corridors area but grandfather in everyone who's already in there now, who maybe moved to Eastlake or Shore Acres, assuming that they would always have DART. They could still have DART sort of grandfathered in. That's one option. Conditional approvals, that we might start approving folks for certain rides, but not others. Say that I would call and ask for a ride, and they'd say, well, you're going to the doctor, and you have a bus stop right in front of your house, and it goes right to St. Anthony's for your appointment. You have to ride the bus, Mr. Miller, but for your trip to the Ford Pinellas meeting up in Clearwater, we'll take you on Care Ride. That's an option. That may cost money, because we pay for that call center work through Care Ride, and that may take a while to implement that kind of conditional improvement, but that has shown other transit systems have saved money on their systems that way. And then last would be functional assessments, really completely changing the way in which we approve new customers, new folks to be approved to ride DART, to really make sure that they cannot ride the regular bus. We would take them over here to what we call our lay-by over here, where we're going to put the electric charging station and give them a sample task. Can you ride the bus? Can you take this bus to the McDonald's and navigate the fare and all that? And if you can, then you would not be approved to ride Care Ride. You'd be approved to ride PSTA's bus system. Regardless, we do have an innovative program called Direct Connect that's open to anyone, including DART customers. Now, the reason that DART customers don't like that is because it costs a lot more money for some trips. They pay a flat $4.50 on Care Ride, no matter if they go across the entire county or just one block. Direct Connect is through our partnerships with Uber, Taxi, and Care Ride, and the customer pays anything more that the trip costs than a $5 subsidy. PSTA's cap is $5, and then they pay the rest. So for many trips, it costs more than $4.50. But that service is available anywhere in Pinellas County, and we're not recommending to change that. So my last slide on this presentation is just then getting into exactly the recommendations that we made on the routes. The list on the left, there's 4 lists in front of you. The list on the left is the board-approved list to get public input on those routes shown in red. DART, the route in Safety Harbor, Route 22 in St. Petersburg that goes along 22nd Avenue North, the Route 58, which you heard from Robin earlier that she rides, that goes on Bryan Dairy Road, part of 3 different routes in St. Petersburg. The western part of Route 5, which has low ridership, Route 16, the north part of 16th Avenue North, and the sort of southern part of Route 38. Now, all of these routes would not be on the list if a lot of people were riding them. They are all, compared to our other routes, lower performing routes. Some of the board members who have been on the board for a while might remember we had some discussions over the years about another route that we ultimately ended up eliminating in Pinellas Park called the Route 444. And we presented to you some pretty dramatic costs per rides. The ridership was so low on that we were spending close to $50 a ride to operate that service. And we could get them an Uber ride for much, much cheaper. None of the routes that we're talking about now are anywhere close to how low the ridership was on the 444. As you heard, some of these routes have substantial riders, 10 passengers an hour, which is fairly substantial, are on this list. Column number 2 is just if you look at the aggregate number of, the gross number of ranking the lowest ridership routes in our system. You can see the Safety Harbor route is still on there, but so is the Dunedin connector. And it's not on the list for public comment. The reason for that is that some of our routes, that route in particular, is grant funded. The FDOT is paying for a large portion of that Dunedin connector. So it doesn't save PSTA as much money to eliminate it. Route 90 is on the list. That's a low ridership route because it only runs 2 times a day from St. Petersburg to the beach. And it's basically an employment shuttle for the beach hotels. And it's packed with workers, but there's only 2 buses. So it has low ridership. You go to the third column, you kind of adjust for that. That's productivity, riders per hour. So you see the Route 90 is no longer on the list. You see that the 100X and the 300X, the express bus routes to Tampa, show up on that list. That's because they have long stretches over the Howard Franklin Bridge and the water that they don't pick up any passengers. So they have strong ridership, but they have long distances and run many hours. So that's why they are sort of looked at as less efficient in some ways. So then you get to the list, which is what we used to come up with the recommendations, closest, highest subsidy to PSTA specifically. How much can PSTA maximize its savings? So grant-funded routes like the Dunedin Connector are not on there because eliminating that would not save us any money. And you can see that all of the routes that are actually on the public comment list also show up on that. When you get to the subsidy per passenger. Now, as I mentioned, none of these are really that terrible subsidy per passenger. The 22 and the Route 5 down at the bottom of the list are nearing about $2 of subsidy per passenger. The fare on PSTA is $2.25, so they're recovering at least half their cost through the fares. Some of them are close. So these are fairly dramatic reductions that we're really hoping that we can avoid cutting into the system that deeply. So in summary, we're looking at a lot of different ways to not implement these comprehensive reductions come June 1st. We're talking with FDOT, and the FDOT seems to be open to the idea that we could move the grant funds to higher performing routes, so that some of the lower performing routes might be reduced instead of a higher performing route. As we've discussed, $5 million a year is really sort of a key target number that would allow us to avoid some of these reductions for the next several years. It's sort of not a complete solution. It's certainly not going to move us up in the chart, but it would allow us to forego these reductions. And we're having a lot of good discussions and looking at all those options for in a way we might be able to generate those kind of funds. So one of the ways is possibly my next presentation, but I'll stop here and take any questions.
Commissioner Gerard? Yeah, I'm having trouble reconciling your numbers with the 5 million, but there's the other one, page 8 of your presentation, that it doesn't seem to, unless you're planning on buying buses every year for these same routes, that doesn't come to $5 million. So I don't understand where the $5 million came from.
Oh, right. The cost savings shown on page 8 don't add up to even $1.7 million, let alone $5 million.
Unless you add the buses in, but go ahead.
Right. The $5 million sort of target, again, would take advantage, would still use built-up reserves, but just reduce them at a lower rate, a more manageable rate than the current PSTA revenue forecasts show. This list, we're hoping would generate at least this amount of savings, but it would not get us out of the woods just by reducing these routes. We would probably still have to come back and make additional cuts at a future date.
Okay, I'm still having trouble with the numbers, but
Yeah,
Because if we're taking-
essentially-
If we're taking 1.7 million out of reserves this year to maintain what we have, or including these cuts?
To maintain what we have now,
So how,
and not including these routes.
so then why would it take 5 million to maintain from someplace else to maintain what we have?
Well, we're just looking to the future. Their costs will escalate, so the $1.7 million deficit this year will grow to a number larger than that if we do nothing in fiscal year 20, and then it'll grow beyond that. So $5 million does not balance the PSTA budget forever. It does allow us to balance the budget this year, probably next year, and the following year, while we keep looking at other solutions.
Right. It seems like more than is needed. But I think it needs to be a more concrete number. That seems sort of pulled out of the air. But I'm sure you all will be talking about that more.
Yeah.
I just wanted to comment too. We had a person come and talk to us yesterday about very passionately about one of the suggested cuts. And one of the things she said was that when she talked to PSTA staff about that she was told to call the Board of County Commissioners and tell them they need to fund this issue. And I think that's fine. I don't think, well, actually, it's not fine, because it does a disservice to your customers and our customers.
I agree.
You know, by shifting the responsibility around, go call somebody else about it because they can just give us money. Well, we know that the answer is not that simple.
Right.
And we're all working on it together, we're all in this together, and I'm asking you now to please ask your staff to not give that answer to people, because the answer really is, we're meeting on this and we're trying desperately to find ways to keep PSTA solvent, but it is not the total responsibility of the Board of County Commissioners or PSTA or the MPO. You know,
Right.
We have to come up with solutions that work long-term, so please don't.
We have already had discussions of that staff on the messages that when customers call, how they're supposed to answer it. I haven't identified that any PSA staff said those words that she said, but maybe that was the way she interpreted it. And so I'm sorry on behalf of PSA that you're exactly right. It is a collective responsibility. I know we're all working very hard on this together, and hopefully we'll just stay on track.
Well, and I don't think that that kind of pressure is necessary, because like I said, I think it does a disservice to your customers to give them false hope. If they just call the BOCC, they'll fix it, you know?
Right.
I agree. As I said, it's not that easy. So, but, you know, I think we're all in it, we're all working on it, so let's do that. Let's, you know, be honest with each other about how this is going to work out.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Gerard. Commissioner Cox?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Miller, what is the subsidy on Route 58, roughly? Do you know the amount?
I don't know. I don't know if Heather is here. You know?
Okay. Well,
we can find that out. It is. It's probably in the $3 per ride
a little over
range.
the ones that are in St. Pete, which St. Pete is already more or less saturated with service. And then that remote area, which is Bryan Dairy Road, and as we heard from Robin, and I've heard from people who work at Raytheon and the Star Center, and you also have the large Bardmore Health Facility for Baycare. That might want to look into that a little more, see what's going to happen with public comment on it. And one other thing that you and I had in our discussion Monday on our one-on-one was the DART situation. And essentially, the care ride's at critical mass right now, meaning the applicants are coming in at like 300 a month, and it's because of word of mouth is out there. Well, hey, you had to wait for that ride or this ride, you can apply for DART, and you know, you're gonna have some reliable service, but it's hurting our budget, and it's also, from what I'm told, hurting the provider, meaning that they're getting much more volume than ever anticipated.
Right. We want to work with CareRide as our partner. We know this is an issue. Exactly as you say, they only have a set number of vehicles to provide all the rides. And we want to look at our whole system to see if we can come up with a better solution.
I'm good with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And members, may I just ask that, you know, this is not the first time we're going to talk about this issue, and the budget of PSTA, it has a lot of moving parts, and it's very complicated to try to wrap your head around. So maybe you could write your questions down and either chat with Debbie Leos or talk further with Brad about the specific budget number questions that you have. It's a little difficult to answer some of the specifics, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that these are cuts that you're proposing for next fiscal year, or are these mid-year cuts that you're talking about? These cuts that, some of these highest subsidy. I'm assuming that we're talking about these changes.
We had been proposing to make these adjustments in June of this year.
So it's this fiscal year.
Yes. Now, again, we haven't gone through all of our due diligence process. We haven't even started getting public comment. What the schedule was to start getting public comment in April, come to the PSTA board in May with hopefully some answers to some of the questions already received, so that at the May board meeting, there would be a vote on what services we would adjust. I mean, some hopefully shorter list on that list to be implemented the next month in June.
That would be the discussion that we're going to have.
Yeah.
Because I certainly think if we're going to be responsible to our residents, that a month's notice or 2 months' notice, like we're talking right now, it's a lot to adjust for residents. So we've given a budget. Everybody's kind of gone into this budget year with a budget, which, we had some comments and concerns with, but, we had a responsibility to deliver on that budget. And so just be ready for those types of questions, because we have people that are relying on us at the end of the year to deliver a budget that delivers the services that we say we're going to do. So I just want to make sure that conversation's part of the discussion.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to just add to that, if I may, that this is one of the reasons why what we're doing in terms of trying to educate the board about the financial issues are so critical. And it is frustrating, when we try to move these issues forward and find solutions, and then because it's a government entity, it takes forever to get a meeting scheduled. And I learned late yesterday after our after our public hearing that it isn't possible to do our next funding workshop until April. It had been hoped that we could do it sometime in early March. But now my understanding is the county administrator is now waiting for feedback from Brad and feedback from Whit before we can schedule that meeting. And so the timing of everything is very, very frustrating. I'm very impatient about this issue, because we all know we have serious issues, and they have to be resolved, or at least a stopgap measure to ensure that we're able to continue services that are essential for our citizens. And that knowledge can help those of us, your chair of Forward Pinellas, several of us sit on other boards that are also involved in transportation. These are big, serious issues, and they require solutions, and we can't wait another 2, 3, or 4 years to do studies and do planning documents. I mean, we've got these documents. We know what the routes should be. We have to put them together and come up with a solution. So I'm sorry for the long-winded, getting into it, but in the interest of time, can we please move to the next agenda item? Brad? Are we
Yes.
good?
Yeah.
Everybody good? Good. Okay, so, and now we're going to talk about our non-member communities, which is another irritant.
Yes, it
Very
is.
well
So
said.
wrap it up, Brad, because we want to have the discussion and,
Okay,
get going.
well, this was the second check mark. This is, and I haven't done a detailed document search, but I am confident this is the number one issue that has unified the PSTA board since its inception in 1982. There's been more hours of discussion at this dais on this topic than any other topic. Now, trivia question. Can any of you right now, without looking at the PowerPoint, name the 7 cities that are not members of PSTA?
I thought it was 5.
Exactly.
Where did we get to 7?
South Pasadena Fire District and Tierra Verde.
There are
Got
2
it.
count.
Got it.
Okay.
You cheated, I bet you did.
Just to move things along, I cheated.
It's just been a long, as the chair said, irritant, or maybe that's not the right word, issue that has existed since the beginning, that these 7 areas of Pinellas County do not levy the ad valorem on their property that the other areas of the county do for PSTA. The fiscal impact of having them join or participate in PSTA ad valorem funding is about $4 million a year, as you can see here. The vast majority of it is in St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island. And this is a protracted history that has, as again, been talked about since the 1970s on PSTA, on the entity that was before PSTA. In 1974, there was an entity called the CPTA, Central Pinellas Transit Authority, that had a vote. Citizens voted to expand it. And on that ballot, it said, in all unincorporated areas of the county. But for some reason, maybe error or whatever, the ballot did not have that question in Tierra Verde in the South Pasadena Fire District. That's why they're not in. So, interesting. That issue was debated by the lawyers until 2003 when it was put to bed. And they are not levying the property tax in South Pasadena Fire District, which has been annexed by South Pasadena and the city of St. Pete and Gulfport. So it's very, very small now. It's only about 2 or 3 blocks of unincorporated county in that area. Then in 1982 and 1983, the PSTA was created by a two referendum vote that again had some issues related to this. The first vote was to create PSTA as a countywide, as an entity. And then the second vote was to levy the property tax. Tierra Verde and South Pasadena Fire District did vote on the tax. They voted and the county supported that. That's what created PSTA. But they didn't vote on the expanding PSTA to include them. So they're not in. In the early 2000s, I presented this to the planning committee, and Whit was there too, and I said it's kind of an oxymoron to say that the MPO in the early 2000s was having a study on how to improve transit, because that's all they ever talk about too. Doing another study on transit funding. But in the early 2000s, they were doing that, and Calvin Harris, who was a county commissioner, who was a longtime PSTA chair in the early 2000s, this was his number one issue, and he worked very, very hard with the mayors of St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island to get them to join PSTA back then. He worked so hard and so diligently on it that it got the commissions in St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island a little upset, and so they went to then Senator Dennis Jones in the state legislature and complained that they were being too lobbied to join PSTA. So Senator Jones took up their cause and filed a bill to eliminate PSTA, sort of a nuclear option that
Then the PSTA board, in order to calm things down, they voted, the PSTA board at this dais voted on just a PSTA policy that for 5 years there would be a moratorium on talking to St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island about joining, to take the pressure off. And they asked the Ford Pinellas, the MPO, and the county commission collectively to join in that moratorium on discussion that ended in 2010. I think Commissioner Long has mentioned the sort of the issue that Senator Jones had done in the past related to this. That's what that was. Senator Jones then withdrew his bill, and peace in the valley was maintained. Some of you might remember just in 2015 we had a discussion. The city of St. Pete Beach came to the county commission with a request to implement a community redevelopment area in St. Pete Beach. And several county commissioners at that discussion said, well, one thing that maybe would be help the county support a CRA in St. Pete Beach was if they joined PSTA. That led to nothing. St. Pete Beach went back. They don't have a CRA. They had no interest in joining PSTA. They took votes in that manner, and they withdrew their request for a CRA because of that. PSTA provides different kinds of service to these non-member cities. In Bel Air Beach and Bel Air Shore, those are right on Gulf Boulevard. The trolley service that we operate all up and down Gulf Boulevard goes right through their city. It just we don't have a bus stop in their city limits. There's bus stops just on the outside border, so they just walk and catch the bus. Kenneth City is a rectangle, as you know, community near Pinellas Park. And we have routes that go on all 4 sides of the rectangle that have bus stops on the Pinellas Park side and the unincorporated Pinellas County side, just not on their side of the road. Treasure Island and St. Pete Beach have paid PSTA an amount shown on the previous page equal to $858,000 now. Since the early 2000s, that's roughly equivalent to the incremental cost of just operating in their city limits. And then the rapid transit, the rapid transit proposal that we're working on now that goes to St. Pete Beach, this has been a project that has been recommended by Ford Pinellas and the PSTA board since 2007. Going to St. Pete Beach from Central Avenue is by far the highest ridership and most successful project that we could recommend. It is the only project that we can recommend that will get the highest, that has received the highest rating that we've received from the federal government for a project like this. It's because of the development and the hotels along St. Pete Beach that are not there in Madeira Beach or a member city. The PSTA board voted in 2007 and again in 2016 that this would be our first project that we would implement. That's why we are moving forward with them. We're making good progress on getting the city of St. Pete Beach's support, again, under sort of the existing arrangement where they would pay the incremental cost, but not be a member of PSTA. So just to summarize, what are the possible solutions? We've had a lot of discussion about this. Option 1 is the one I think we all know of or have talked about. Option 1 is for a city to just vote, to put it on the ballot and have their citizens vote to join PSTA. It's a pretty simple solution, but one that has not happened in 37 years. They could do this at any time, and they've chosen not to. So maybe it'll happen. I kind of doubt it. Option number 2 is a different solution that honestly I did not know of, but Alan Zimmett, actually, who's the historian who told me much about this or provided me the documents of this history. This is how PSTA was created, a 2-step process with 2 different votes. And this is essentially a way to fix this inequity or problem that has existed for a very long time that the county commission could do if they chose to do so. Step number 1 would be for the county commission to put on the ballot a question that would only be asked in the existing PSTA district, the existing cities and county that is part of the PSTA today. Should the PSTA district be expanded to county-wide? Yes or no? St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island would not be asked that question. It's not up to them. And then step number 2 would be a second vote. Could be on the same ballot or a different ballot. Should the newly expanded PSTA district levy the same 0.75 ad valorem property tax? It would be asked to the entire county. So even if, say, Treasure Island and St. Pete Beach voted 100% against it, theoretically, maybe since it wouldn't be an adjustment to the rest of the county, maybe it would pass. I don't know. That is a way. Certainly the county attorney and the PSTA attorneys would have to get really involved in mapping out exactly how the referendum language looked and how that would work. It would be certainly a very, very challenging thing to explain to the citizens. As I said, there's very, very few people, except for Mr. Zimmett, that know that these cities do not participate and how the funding works and all that. So the question really is it worth it? Is $4 million, it's certainly meaningful dollars, but is it worth probably what would be a major education campaign to educate the citizens about this? I'm sure there might be some questions or comments.
Questions, comments, thoughts?
Well, I do have a question. Do you know if Mr. Zimmett has talked to the county attorney about this at all?
No.
I can say that no. I don't think we've had any discussions with the county attorney's office to this point.
Commissioner Rice?
Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's a lot of different ideas on the table. This is a big one. I know that it's also been discussed going to the legislature to allow cities to conduct referendums. And I think that the issue of non-member governments, I think it's a fair issue to discuss, but I'm not convinced it's realistic. I don't know that any plan that requires these separate referendums into areas that for over 30 years have not taken their own steps to align with us is realistic. I don't think anything that goes to the legislature is the most timely, is the most effective route to go either, given the amount of time and political capital that takes, and given the track record working with our legislature. So, I mean, this presentation's really helpful, and I'm glad we're discussing it, and I think it's a fair discussion, but ultimately, I'm not convinced that this is what we need to do at this point in time. I'm worried that it could be, we could, I feel like we're focusing on little battles when we need to be focusing on a bigger war.
I agree.
Sorry to use a war metaphor, but I'm also concerned, I don't know when the timing for this would be, but I think we're on the precipice of some good victories, like the finishing the Central Avenue BRT. And I would just hate to see where, if this referendum was not carried out well or managed well, I just hate to see us unnecessarily get a black eye because we're trying to win campaigns in these small areas which historically haven't wanted to join PSTA. I'll tell you also, I was there at St. Pete Beach when we went to their commission to discuss the alignment for our Central Avenue BRT. And I was really dismayed by some of the things I heard spoken at the public hearing, and I was really disappointed that the sitting elected representatives did nothing to rebuke what were frankly racist statements made at the podium. So, it was awful.
Thank you.
It was awful. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Barkley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The other issue, and I concur with Commissioner Rice that small incremental battles may not be as effective as larger, more comprehensive ones. And so my other question is some effort towards a replacement funding structure, such as what we looked at with Greenlight Pinellas, where we restructure how PSTA is funded in general, might be a better approach to this.
Thank you. Commissioner Justice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few questions. We talked about this in one of the committees, but can the two questions be put on the same ballot? Or do they have to be two separate, one in a primary, one in a general, or one in general this year? Can they both questions be on the same ballot in those different geographical areas? And then what's the cost to the PSTA to have a referendum question added to a general election ballot? Those are kind of the questions. I think it would be a tough one because I do think there's groups in the community that would want to defeat anything for the purpose of defeating anything. Yes. So I don't think a multi-million-dollar investment in an education campaign is worthwhile. But on the other hand, when you're looking at $3 million, $30 million over the next 10 years, I don't know that you can just dismiss it out of hand.
Thank you, Commissioner Justice. Commissioner Eggers, and may I ask that we try not to be repetitive in the interest of time? And secondly, I also think that I'd like to just weigh in and say that I think Commissioner Rice made an incredibly important point. And while this is a worthy discussion, I think there is a bigger, more pressing issue that needs to be addressed, that we must have a larger conversation that is just focused on this particular issue, because, you know, we could talk for hours on solutions, but I don't think that these particular recommendations are worthy of, I just don't see us going in this direction, just saying. Okay, Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, just on the same vein, because I really didn't know that, what you just said about option 1 and 2, so that's good to know. And so are there options to get out of PSTA? Can cities opt out? I mean, we're trying to get a city to opt in. Can the city opt out? Because one of the concerns that I've had is that we continue taking away services from areas that are paying their PSTA millage, and other areas that are getting probably more service than they are, that aren't contributing. So there's a twofold question there, and because I do think these small victories are important. If we're going to build credibility with our residents, ultimately, if the end game is for another referendum for a half a penny or a penny for transit, if that's the end game, then I think we need to be able to show a really strong effort. And I think you've done that today in some of the things that you're talking about, the Medicaid issue that you're talking about, this issue that we're talking about gas tax, we're talking about tourist development funds for some routes. So if you start to add these pieces up, I'm not saying it is the ultimate solution, but we're trying to be fair with the dollars that we currently have. And I think that is an important statement. So I understand the comment that, if we could get that other thing done, we probably avoid having these conversations about some of the smaller things. But some of the smaller things are relevant. It's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think that Dunedin's going to try to opt out of paying their PSTA tax or the school tax, or it's like, well, I don't have any kids anymore, so let's opt out. We're all in this kind of together, so I think it is a fair conversation, and it is, as Commissioner Justice said, significant. And I do think that we can multitask. I think we can move down the path on many fronts to get to a solution that's viable. Because at the end of it, one or two of those things might work out.
Right.
And others may work out in 2 years or 3 years. So I think we need to do this on many fronts. So just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers. Commissioner Gerard.
And I would completely agree with Commissioner Eggers, which is probably a rare event.
Wow.
For many of us. But I also wanted to, I think the idea of fairness is very relevant here. You know, I don't see St. Pete Beach giving us $2 million more a year for putting the BRT line through their city, which is going to greatly enhance their service, and particularly those big hotels who have all these employees that use the bus system to get to work. And so I think if they're not willing to do what's right, then we do have almost a responsibility to the rest of the county, because if we don't do something like this, or we don't get the funds we need, we're cutting services to the rest of the county. You know, they're not going to pay their fair share of the service that they're getting in the future. And I had a problem from the beginning of putting the BRT line through St. Pete Beach when they weren't even a member. I understand why we're doing that, but, you know, it's not fair. And I also think that this, if we did a referendum like this, and of course we have a long way to go with the attorneys, because they always slow things down. And you could tell Mr. Zimmerman I said so. You know, I think it has a very good chance of winning on that fairness issue. I mean, we're asking the rest of the county to say, yeah, these cities need to participate just like we do, because this is an all-in issue. It's all about our transportation system for the county, not just for these cities. So I don't think we'd have any trouble passing that, and particularly if we framed it right. But I don't know about the timing of that. If we put it on the November ballot, then the only people that would vote on it would be in St. Petersburg, for the most part, because there aren't very many issues on the ballot this year. So
Thank you.
it's also a timing thing.
Thank you, Commissioner Gerard. Commissioner Gracie, do I see you down? Oh, Commissioner Cog.
It's important to know also that the DART service is provided to these communities except for Tierra Verde, all right, Tom?
Right.
Okay.
That's right.
So they're getting that service.
And that's a part of the equation into how much they pay us.
Okay, they do pay now?
The good thing about, well, I've been talking about some of the challenges with DART. The good thing about DART related to St. Pete Beach and Treasure Island is we know where you live if you ride DART. So we compute the number of people who live in Treasure Island and St. Pete Beach and bill them the full, I mean, the number is factoring in the full cost.
Of DART.
Yeah.
But now, how about Bel Air?
We do provide that service.
Bel Air Beach?
Yeah, yeah.
Do they pay?
No.
They don't pay. Kansas City also.
Okay. Okay.
And they get DART
It's
service.
important to factor that in, I would say.
Yeah.
All right. Any more questions on this subject? Okay. What? No, I don't, because we're not going to. Brad, do you want to, it says here I'm supposed to ask you if you want to summarize the reports in our packet and future meeting subjects.
Oh, yes.
Are you prepared to do that?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
As soon as
good.
I see what's in there. Okay. At your places are some flyers related to some services we're providing in our communities, thanks to partnerships with our communities. First, starting this Friday, we have a great partnership that we've done for the last 2 years with the city of Clearwater to provide the trolley services that operate already at no cost between a park and ride lot located at what was formerly known as the Clearwater City Hall, but no longer, the parking lot right in front of the old City Hall, to the beach. And it's been very, very popular over the last couple of years. That service, again, starts on Friday and will last all the way through the spring break period through April 30th, ending when the ridership is even at its highest, at its peak, for the Sugar Sands Festival that is right there at the end of April. So that's this little palm card. And to celebrate that, on Friday, you're welcome to join me and some of the PSA staff. We're having one of our rider town halls where we group out right there at the Clearwater Beach Transit Center on lovely Clearwater Beach the day after tomorrow afternoon.
What time?
I think it starts at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. It usually entails a good mix of just random riders who are riding to the beach on a Friday afternoon if the weather's nice, plus some of my favorite friends who take the bus all the way across the entire county to come yell at me. They usually come. Maybe some of our folks who are worried about their routes might come. It'll be great. The other flyer is about our service, which has already started. I think there's already been a home game. For home games at the Toronto Blue Jays spring training up in Dunedin, the Jolly Trolley is on what we call a detour. Essentially, in order to serve as a free park and ride lot shuttle, which I think some commissioners have used before to get to the baseball games, you can ride free from downtown Dunedin at the park and ride to the Blue Jays games, to and from the Blue Jays games. It's very, very successful, thanks to our new PSTA Commissioner, Heather Gracie, for being in a video with me to highlight it. And it took a little while for the Canadians that migrate down to Dunedin to, and I guess are filling up all the Airbnbs in your city. It took them a while, but they found it, and they very much like the service. So those are at your places. On ridership and performance updates, I just would note that we have seen ridership increases 4 out of the last 5 months, which is a plus. You know, some of those issues are related to hurricanes not happening and other things, so not necessarily all within our control, but it does appear as if we're seeing some pretty good ridership at the beginning of this year, which will help our budget. With that, I'll just remind you, as you leave today, we are having an open house out in the lobby about our Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit, and I encourage you to, if you have any interest. We've heard that there's some marketing geniuses on the PSTA board who have some ideas on maybe rebranding that service. And so there is a place out there for you to submit your great ideas.
You're talking about me.
You, Commissioner Justice, and others are very good at marketing.
A quick question. Under the PSTA future meetings, when you talk, one of them is a bus stop construction discussion coming up. Could somewhere along the way, just maybe it will help me just stop asking about it over and over. Can we have the discussion about pullovers where buses stop?
Oh, yes.
And the good, the bad, and the ugly of how come we can't get these buses pulled off the road? Because I think I see more cussing going on towards PSTA when they get stuck behind one of those buses forever. So maybe, if you could just maybe have that kind of conversation of, well, how and where and when we could possibly do those kinds of things and what it would take on our part. Thank you.
Anybody else for the good of the order? Oh, Commissioner Eggers, would you like to put your light on so people can actually hear what you're saying? It's so important.
Well, oh goodness, thank you, Commissioner Long. That was the one comment I wanted to make. You talked about the partnerships, which I was also going to address. Thank you for that. I do use a Jolly Trolley, Commissioner Long, just so you know. I
do too.
I don't know if it's for symbolism or not, but I do use that Jolly Trolley. But I just wanted to thank Ross Silvers, who has agreed to step up and serve on the County Council for Persons with Disabilities. Since the inception of that, I've thought it was important to have a sight-impaired person on that, and we've had that for a number of years, and Doug Town has left the board, and in looking for the right person. Ross expressed some interest and quite frankly had several people that recommended Ross, so I look forward to his involvement and his input, and that's all I had. Thank you. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you. Anyone else for the good of the order? I thought it was Commissioner Banther's last meeting. We are really going to miss you and your voice from Tarpon Springs.
Thank you.
Do we know who is going to be replacing you?
My assumption is Rhea Sieber. Of course, the new board, which is April 9th, will vote on that, but she's expressed interest and no one else has. And even the incumbents, if they win, or the challengers, if they win, I think she'd be the one that would be coming on the board for that. She would be in office for one more year, so.
Excellent. Well, we will miss you, and I hope that you will continue to keep in touch with us whenever you have some input that you'd like to give.
I will, thank you very much.
Thank you, and please continue to be an advocate for
I will.
PSTA.
I will, thank you.
Thank you, David. Anyone else? Are we good? All right, then, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Yes. All right. Yes.
Thank you.
See you.